Oh boy, the Nintendo Switch 2 hype train does not stop. We have a lot more news to discuss today. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we do indeed have much to discuss regarding Nintendo and the Switch 2. We have an update on the Nintendo Direct rumor situation, and it's actually quite an interesting, positive update, so we'll be getting into that. But also we have some pretty significant news. We have a very exciting update for No Man's Sky, day 1 on Switch 2, so we'll be able to enjoy this tomorrow, and I think this just convinced me to get the game, so we'll be speaking on that. We have some interesting updates regarding Mario Kart World, regarding Diddy Kong making it to the game, regarding what's happening with 200cc, and I do think there are some very interesting implications for what's to come with this game, so we'll be diving into that as well. And we have a very impactful message from the CEO of Nvidia, Jensen Huang. So there's much to get into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out I am aiming for a goal of 60,000 subscribers. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So yesterday we got a special edition of Creator's Voice, and in this one it was the CEO of Nvidia, Jensen Huang, talking about the Nintendo Switch 2, and he said some pretty significant things. He talks about how Nintendo Switch 2 has the most advanced graphics in a mobile device ever, which of course is coming from Nvidia, the makers of the Switch 2, so they are going to talk this up, so maybe not everyone wants to take that too seriously. But regardless, we've seen some impressive things on Switch 2 already. I continually bring up Cyberpunk, for example, and I think that really just goes to show just how impressive the Switch 2 truly is. But perhaps what is the most significant element of this creator's voice is how Huang pays respects to Satoru Iwata, perhaps the most important president in Nintendo history, who passed away some years ago before the Switch could come out. But he talks about how the Nintendo Switch is his legacy. It was the last thing he left for Nintendo and the world. And the Switch has arguably become Nintendo's greatest success of all time. And with the Switch 2, it's building upon that, building upon Iwata's legacy. And so I really appreciate these words from Huang here about Iwata-san. I think they are impactful, I think they are meaningful, and I do think it offers some really good perspective on what's to come for Switch 2. The Switch, overall, is the legacy of Iwata, and in his final days, he was able to put together a plan that has put Nintendo in a position where they may never need to look back again. This is the best of Nintendo, and they are continuing in this direction, and that is a great thing. Moving on to some news that I did not expect to see this morning. There is going to be a significant update to No Man's Sky, and this is also coming to Nintendo Switch 2. The Switch 2 version is going to support higher resolutions, a better frame rate, better texture density, cross saves, crossplay, gyro controls, touchscreen controls, multiplayer with 9 years of updates, and it's a free upgrade for Switch owners of No Man's Sky. In handheld mode, this game can run at 1080p 40 frames per second. In docked mode, 1440p at 30 frames per second. However, there will be 4K textures, so things are going to look really nice on this console. And with all of this being done, I think I might have just been convinced to pick up this game. This game was always an exciting concept, but at first it wasn't really fully realizing the vision, but over the years they have slowly improved the game, and now they are far closer to meeting that initial vision. But perhaps what I think is even more exciting news, it kind of depends on your taste, these are also the developers of Light No Fire. So Light No Fire is a fantasy medieval style version of No Man's Sky, and I think this bodes well for a nice Switch 2 version down the road as well. So personally, I'm looking even more forward to that. In other news, we've gotten word that there's going to be even more Switch 1 games getting Switch 2 compatibility updates here. Now, I think something that should be pointed out, as you see for all the different patch notes for these different games, they're talking about several adjustments that have been made to improve gameplay on Switch 2. That's kind of like the common thing for most of these games. The Switch 2 isn't just emulating the Switch, it's a little bit of a hybrid here, and so it requires more work. And so Nintendo is going to be continually going back to different games, working and tweaking on some things so all the different games can run more smoothly. I've seen some people talking about how it's weird that Nintendo's providing updates for 3D All-Stars, but this is so 3D All-Stars can play and run well on Switch 2. For those wondering why this might be considered a weird thing to do, it's because 3D All-Stars was discontinued. But I think the idea behind this is that Nintendo is trying to make good on the promise of proper backwards compatibility on Switch 2 with Switch 1 games, and 3D All-Stars is a significant game So even though it's not selling anymore from Nintendo, they've discontinued putting out more copies out into the world, there are still several million out there, and there are many people, like myself, that are going to want to play this game on Switch 2, so they're going to go back and make sure it's running as it should on this system. But there are a variety of Nintendo games getting different updates for Switch 2. One in particular that's worth noting though is Echoes of Wisdom, because apparently they've added a new little feature here where you can now have favorites for your echoes in the game. This is something that I think would have made a big difference when I initially played the game, but now it's there, so for those who go back to the game or are picking it up for the first time, there's now favorites for your echoes, which will make playing through the game and organizing and sifting through the different echoes you're going to use far easier. Another Switch 1 game that's seen a substantial improvement on Switch 2 is Super Mario Odyssey. From El Analista de Bits, we can see that the original Mario Odyssey on Switch 1 ran at a native 900p 60 FPS, and then on Switch 2, it's upscaled from a 1440p to 2160p at 60 FPS, and even though right here this feed I'm using is a 1080p 60 FPS capture, you can see that there is a substantial difference between the two sides here. The clarity is just insane. And then here we can get a good look at the shadows and how much better they look in the Switch 2 version of Mario Odyssey. Or here we can see another look, and it's just amazing how much more crisp the environment appears. And then there was even a little bit of a frame rate test, and as we see with the red line, rock solid 60 FPS. On Switch 1, there were the occasional dips. So yeah, Super Mario Odyssey looks a lot better on Nintendo Switch 2, and this is a free upgrade. Moving on, it looks like we have some hope for Diddy Kong coming to Mario Kart World. So in a recent interview, IGN had asked Kosuke Yabuki, a producer of Mario Kart World, on the status of Diddy Kong, and he said this: "I'm afraid I can't say anything at this time." So that does not confirm that Diddy Kong is coming to Mario Kart World, but it is very interesting that he did not outright deconfirm it. To me, this says that there is a plan that they have in mind for Diddy Kong. He's not at liberty to say currently, and I think this is interesting when we consider all of our speculation surrounding Donkey Kong Bonanza. It may be the case that 1, Diddy Kong is just a character that we're going to unlock as we progress deeper into Mario Kart World, and it may be as simple as that. However, it's also possible he won't be added until a little bit later because Nintendo has some plans regarding Donkey Kong Bonanza. Perhaps they want to do a little bit of cross-promotion here, and they will be adding some Donkey Kong characters as a free update just a month later when Donkey Kong Bonanza is about to come out. It's also possible that they will eventually add Diddy Kong, but it could be years from now. We didn't see Diddy Kong added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe until near the end of the Switch generation. But I'm going to lean in the direction that we'll learn something relatively soon. But with this in mind, this latest news on what's going on with 200cc gives me some pretty good optimism. So in another interview with Mario Kart World producer Kosuke Yabuki from the Rolling Stone, Yabuki was asked about 200cc, and we learned that 200cc is not in the game at least day one. However, he said this: "Some players are really happy with the addition of high difficulty modes like this. However, does that mean we're going to consider adding engine sizes that are larger than 150cc to Mario Kart World? I'm afraid I can't say just yet." So, I do find it interesting that 200cc is not apparently included in the game initially. I don't know if he's just being coy about it being unlockable later into the game, or if this is going to be an update. It seems like it's been confirmed that it will not be actually in the game at first. Now, 200cc was an update to Mario Kart 8 fairly early on back on Wii U, a free update. So maybe they're just going to add 200cc a little bit later. Maybe what they're thinking with Mario Kart World is that there are just going to be some updates that will come, free updates, to keep people engaged and interested in the game throughout the year. Mario Kart World is a big deal game. Mario Kart World is the launch title for Switch 2, and considering the history of Mario Kart, has some huge sales potential. But Nintendo may want to appeal to that and really try and push it and keep it relevant for a long while, so they may have a plan of consistent updates over the next year or so, if not even beyond, where different things are going to be added to the game, like a 200cc mode update, like Diddy Kong and other characters, and different things like that. Now, I'm stressing free updates here because I feel like things like this would be free. However, I do also envision eventually, probably not early on, we may not hear about it for a while, but I do think eventually some sort of paid expansion will be announced for Mario Kart World. But before that, we will have this base game that's already quite sizable, and they will be adding some free updates for some time to keep us interested in playing and talking about this game. And if 200cc is added like after a month or two, I don't think that's going to be that much of a big deal because I'm not going to even dive into 200cc until I complete everything else. Like, I'm going to work through everything with 150cc first, and the mirror mode or reverse mode or whatever's in there, and then I'll move on to 200cc. And perhaps I'll beat everything in the game, and then they'll announce the 200cc, and then that will have me coming back for more. So some people are upset that 200cc is not in the game. I'll admit, personally, I don't like that it's not there day one either, but also thinking about the grand scheme of things, if it's added early on for free, I don't think it's really going to make that much of a difference, and in a way, it might be a smart strategy for Nintendo to keep the game relevant for a longer period of time. But let's now move on to an interesting rumor from Nash Weedle. And as we've been talking about lately, Nash Weedle's gotten a lot of things right regarding Switch 2. However, here's something else, take it with a grain of salt, but this is what he says. Leak Express. Nintendo ha confirmado a retailers que poco después del lanzamiento de Switch 2 habrá nuevos anuncios. So basically, shortly after launch of Switch 2, there will be new announcements. Now, as he says here, no se confirma si será a través de un Nintendo Direct, pero parece que se viene una nueva oleada de anuncios. So we're going to get a new wave of announcements. It is not certain whether this will be a Direct or not. And so this is an interesting update here, because we first got a rumor from PH Brazil that he had heard about a Nintendo Direct happening in either the launch week of Switch 2 or the week afterwards. And I think at this point it's fair to say there will not be a Nintendo Direct this week. Next week does make more sense though. However, Nintendo corroborated this story that they had also heard about a Nintendo Direct happening relatively soon. And then after that, we got official word that Nintendo is an official partner of Summer Games Fest, which is somewhat like E3, where we're going to be getting a variety of announcements across the industry over the course of this weekend, starting June 6th, immediately after the launch of Switch 2. And so Nintendo is officially registered with Summer Games Fest. What does that mean exactly? We are unsure. We are assuming it at least means that there will be some significant announcements for Switch 2. They may just be third-party related, just not quite sure what it means exactly. But Nintendo is involved officially in some way. It could mean something even as big as their own Nintendo Direct presentation at some point during the Summer Games Fest show, but that hasn't been announced yet. However, we also got an update from Nate the Hate, who has said he has heard nothing, and Nate the Hate tends to know about these things, so if he hasn't heard anything, that will lead many people to be doubtful of something going on. Now, personally, as I said repeatedly on this topic, historically speaking, looking over the last 3 years, since E3 is no longer a thing, Nintendo's no longer beholden to that show, their Summer Directs or June Direct presentations have all been happening in the second half of the month. So based off that, it's probably safer to expect that we will have to wait a few more weeks until we get a bevy of news from a Nintendo Direct. However, because Nintendo is partnered with Summer Games Fest and we do have these rumors here, maybe there's reason to think otherwise. Now, with what Nash Weedle is saying here, he's not saying it's a Direct. He's not saying it isn't a Direct. He's not sure. It just seems like he has heard that there is going to be some significant announcements happening soon. Maybe this is going to be something having to do with Summer Games Fest, where there will be some significant announcements, and they're getting involved here because the Switch 2 is launching, and so they want to build up that momentum, that excitement, offer up some more interesting announcements. Maybe they are not first-party announcements, maybe they're big third-party partner announcements, maybe some more exclusives or big updates, and that's what it is. And then a week or two later, then we get our Nintendo Direct. Or we just get our Nintendo Direct next week, and that's what it is. Regardless, it seems like there's a decent amount of smoke here to think that we're going to be getting some pretty significant Nintendo news in terms of actual game announcements coming to the console. Listen, I'm a hardcore Nintendo fan. Nintendo is my favorite company by far, if that's not obvious with this channel. And so what I really get hyped for are the first-party Nintendo announcements. I want to see more about Metroid Prime 4. I want to see more updates on Mario Kart World. I want to see what's going on with Donkey Kong Bonanza. I want some other big games announced for this year and beyond. I want to see 3D Mario, Smash, Animal Crossing, more on Pokemon. Is Luigi's Mansion 4 truly coming soon or not? We don't know. These are the things that I'm most excited for, yes. However, I'm also a gamer. I like just awesome games. And so I get excited for thinking about playing No Man's Sky on Switch 2, or maybe eventually Light No Fire, or seeing how great Cyberpunk runs on the console, or how I recently got this GameStop leak perhaps suggesting that Crimson Desert, a game that kind of feels like a more realistic looking Tears of the Kingdom, that has me very excited if that's truly coming to Switch 2. I would want to play that on Switch 2, so if that gets confirmed during Summer Games Fest, if that's a part of these different announcements that Nash was alluding to me, that's a big deal. And I think that's going to be a big deal for a lot of other Nintendo fans as well. Regardless of what the rumors are suggesting, we at least know that Nintendo's officially partnered with Summer Games Fest, and historically speaking, Nintendo will need to give us more news on their games relatively soon. But regardless, in just a few short hours, we are finally going to be able to enjoy Nintendo Switch 2 and Mario Kart World in our homes. And that is so exciting. Are you ready? I sure am. Anyways, everyone, let me know what you think in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.